How about this, Harry? Our guest on this episode of the Odd G's podcast, you see him right there. If you're watching it visually, I see an NHL All-Star jersey. Is that a Campbell Conference jersey back there, Harry? The one and only Kenny Albert.
It's funny you say that. It's funny you say that because last December, I was on a Zoom call with Brian Daboll, the current head coach of the New York Giants, and he was the offensive coordinator with Buffalo, and our crew was about to go up and do a Bills game. I had never met Brian before, never spoken with him, and he got on the Zoom just like you guys just did, and the first thing he said to me, is that a Campbell or Wells Conference jersey?
Mm-hmm.
He grew up in the Buffalo area, big hockey fan, so I gave him big props for bringing up the conferences from the late 80s, early 90s.
Back when hockey was, great. I watched it every night.
Oh, there were some high-scoring games back then.
Oh, it was great. Yeah. But you brought up Buffalo and the NFL. Give me your early thoughts here 3 weeks in. If you would have asked people, last weekend, maybe to say who's the two best teams in football, they would probably say Buffalo and maybe the Philadelphia Eagles. What are your thoughts on that through three weeks?
Right. I'm not sure how many people would have expected the Dolphins and the Eagles to be the only 3-0 teams at this point. To be honest, I don't get to see as much as you guys do from around the league. I'm always at a game Sunday, and then I catch part of the Sunday night game on the plane when I get home, and then the Monday night game. So I can really go in depth on the 6 teams that I've seen so far. But no, there have been some great stories. Like I said, I don't know how many people would have expected these two teams to be the only undefeated teams. A little bit of a surprise that the Raiders, I had their game on Sunday against the Titans, 0-3 playoff team a year ago. That was really a game. Both teams needed it badly. Tennessee and Las Vegas both started off 0-2. And our crew put up a graphic in the fourth quarter. Teams that start 1-2 have a 25% chance of making the playoffs based on numbers back over the last 3 decades. 0-3, it's only 2.5%. So that was a huge game. Now it's a little different now because you have the extra regular season game, so the numbers are skewed a little bit. But it's been an exciting start to the season.
I tell you, could Scottsdale, Phoenix area withstand a Buffalo Bills, Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl with those two fan bases?
Ooh, Bills Mafia and Eagle fans, forget it. Maybe they get some attendance at a Coyotes game, Har.
That's a good point.
We have about 5,000 seats to sell this year.
That's right.
Yeah. Make it Flyers and Sabres night and get rid of Arizona and you'd sell it out. What does that week look like for you leading up to an NFL game, Kenny? Because you guys got to get downloaded on so much stuff. First of all, do they fly you first class?
They do, usually.
Oh, okay. Just making sure. If not, I was going to recommend to be your representation and get that taken care of in your contract.
When I fly for hockey broadcasts, we try to put Keith Jones in the last row, but doesn't always work.
No, he's front of the plane guy. Always nonstop talking too. But what does that week look like preparing for an NFL game? I mean, you've done them for so long. You flex so many different muscles doing all these different sports. So what does it look like for an NFL week?
It's pretty comprehensive. The NFL, from a broadcast standpoint, is so much different than the other sports, hockey, basketball, baseball, because those teams play all the time. NHL and NBA teams play 3 or 4 games a week. Baseball teams play 5 or 6 games a week. The football broadcasts are all national on the TV side. There are no local broadcasts. So we might have 2 teams week 17 that we haven't seen all season. So you're really playing catch up. This week I have Carolina, Arizona down in Charlotte. So during the week, Monday through Thursday, we're on our own, doing our own prep, watching both teams' previous games. I have a checklist that I go down. I read pretty much every article I could find from both cities. You prepare charts and statistics and go through materials that are sent by various sources. We get a big packet from each team from Fox with stats and notes from the NFL. So Monday through Thursday, you're looking through all that stuff. I'll fly this week, Thursday night, sometimes Friday morning, depending where we are. The Panthers happen to be practicing real early on Friday, so I'll get in there Thursday night. We'll go to Carolina's practice Friday. We'll get to sit down with Matt Rule and Phil Snow, the defensive coordinator, and a couple of players, Baker Mayfield and one of the players from the defensive side. And then Friday night, we'll have a production dinner, 7 or 8 of us, myself, Jonathan Vilma, Shannon Spakes, our sideline reporter, producer, director, and a couple of the other folks we work with. Saturday, we'll go see the visiting team in their hotel. and we'll sit down again with a coach, a coordinator, a couple of players. Then we have our own production meeting on Saturday night. So it's probably 30 to 40 hours of work preparing for an NFL game. It doesn't feel like work to me. Yes, there is a lot of prep and travel involved, but to me, it's fun studying sports, watching games, reading about the teams. But, everybody watching the game, the fans of those teams have watched all of their team's games. So you're playing catch up during the week. Jonathan Vilm is watching a lot of film, and we're all kind of comparing notes. So that's a typical NFL week. I have a checklist I go through for each and every game. Now you sprinkle in hockey starting up. I do some basketball as well. Worked the Phillies game last week. So you just have to be real organized and get the work done. I tend to get a lot done on flights and in taxis and Ubers, airports, hotel rooms. So I probably have it down to a science as far as the preparation, because I've been at it now for just over 3 decades, which is hard to believe.
Okay.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's what I was going to ask about, once, because hockey's starting up right now. And of course you do the Rangers, and I did some research on you, and I found out that you did 4 games, 4 sports, different sports in 4 days. I didn't know this. You did the Vikings Steelers game, with a typical game, on a Sunday. And then that night you did ALCS work with the Yankees. I guess you were in the locker room, doing interviews and so forth.
That wasn't the play-by-play. That was post-game interviews.
Right. And then the next day you did a Rangers game. And then the day after that, you did a Knicks game. I mean, that's unbelievable.
That's happened a couple of times in October when everything's going on at once.
Wow.
As we speak now on a Tuesday, I'm actually coming off a stretch, although things were relatively quiet over the summer, get a little bit of downtime, and now it's all starting up again. Actually did work 3 different sports the last 5 days. I had that Phillies Brave game last Thursday, Titans Raiders on Sunday, and then the Rangers Islanders preseason game last night. So it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy the variety. Football and hockey are the sports that I work the most and have worked the most through the years. I do fill in on about 15 to 20 Knicks games per year, and do some baseball on Fox as well. But it's a fun time of year. And you're right. In October, there have been a couple of instances where it's 4 sports in the span of 4 or 5 days at times.
The thing about it is the way to do a broadcast for all of those sports is completely different. It's a totally different rhythm and different, it's not muscle memory, because they all require you to have a different approach and mindset and skill set going into it. What's it like, to try and shift gears and go, okay, I just did a hockey game and I went to overtime last night. Here's the pitch, that whole thing. I mean, that's not easy to do.
I guess I'm so used to it. And there's also the factor of going back and forth. Hockey is really the only sport where this applies for me personally, going back and forth between TV and radio as well.
Yeah.
That might even be a bigger challenge than going back and forth between sports, because I might do a hockey radio game on a Tuesday and a TV game on Wednesday, and it's a lot different. Radio, you have to be so much more descriptive, give the time and the score way more often, whereas on TV, you can pull back, let your analysts come in more frequently. So, that's part of it as well. To me, hockey is the easiest. Most people think it would be the hardest, because
I would think it'd be the hardest.
Changes on the fly.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because I've done it now for 32 years. It's like riding a bike. Basketball is similar. It's players going up and down the court, the ice. There are stoppages, more stoppages in basketball than hockey. Football is the most rhythmic. It's one play and then it's 20 or 25 seconds. It's another play and then it's 20 or 25 seconds. Baseball to me is the most challenging, because you have so much downtime between pitches, between the ball getting put into play. But going back and forth between sports, I guess because I've done it for so long, that's not too bad as far as the level of the challenge. But you just have to be organized. I'm reading for hours and hours every day about the various teams and sports. You kind of have to keep your thoughts pretty organized, like I said, and watching all the games that I watch, whether it's football, hockey, baseball, basketball, leading up to a telecast. Like I said, it takes a lot of time, but it's fun. I wouldn't want to be doing anything else.
Football's got to be getting tougher with the quicker they run these plays. You don't have as much time in between plays to sort of let your analysts, describe what happened and, a little back and forth. You got to go on to the next play.
Right. That happens with certain teams and certain offenses. Probably not as much for the play-by-play announcer as, like you said, for the analyst and the the producer and director, they might have a harder time getting replays in, for example, between plays if the team goes quickly back up to the huddle. So probably affects the replays and the analysts more so than it would me, although it's a team effort. But you do get that with certain teams, certain offenses, and it's just part of the fun that we have in calling these games every week.
It's crazy to me that you're able to shift gears like that, because I imagine, like you said, in hockey and basketball, you're just calling it as you see it. There's so much flow to those sports, and then the rigid nature of football, and it's play and let the analyst do his thing and the whole thing. How's it been working with Jonathan Vilma?
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, I might hold the record. I've worked with over 225 color analysts throughout my career.
Oh, my goodness.
And I just finished up a book, actually, which will come out about a year from now. And one of the chapters is about the various color analysts that I work with. I list all of them. He's a really smart guy, has a high football IQ. Love hearing some of his stories about going back and forth with Peyton Manning in that Saints-Colts Super Bowl when Jonathan was calling the defense and Peyton was the architect of the Colts offense. He's done a really nice job as an analyst. It's his third year now. The first year was a challenge. It was the COVID year. We weren't even allowed to have meals together, have production people in person. We were traveling to the games on our own, so never really got the opportunity to know each other very well. Last year, it was a bit of a hybrid. We were able to have meals and be in the same car. So he's doing a great job. Had a terrific playing career with the Jets and the Saints and the University of Miami prior to that. We have Shannon Spake on the sidelines. In hockey, I get to work with Eddie Olczyk and Keith Jones on Turner, Dave Maloney and Joe Micheletti on the Rangers, Walt Clyde Frazier on the Knicks. So the color analysts are such a big part of it. I look at myself as the traffic cop. I try to set them up as often as possible, and really can't think of a color analyst that I did not enjoy working with throughout my career. I have a long list, Hall of Famers, champions in all the sports, and they all bring a unique perspective to the telecasts.
Will there be a chapter on Baldy?
Baldy's one of my favorites.
One on his pinky too, Har.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Worked 4 years with Baldy, 2003 to 2006. We had a lot of fun. I could still picture Baldy at my house here in North Jersey, where I still live. This was during the time we worked together, and my daughter was 5 at the time, 5 or 6. Now she's 23, and she had a bunch of friends here, and Baldy was here for a July 4th party, and he was playing the role of camp counselor up on the diving board, throwing all the kids into the pool. Then we had a basketball game in the driveway. So he's definitely among my favorites of all the analysts that I ever worked with. And,
yeah, both of us have worked with him
again,
too.
He's such a great football mind as well. I love watching his Baldy's breakdowns. And hearing him on radio and television broadcasts. He's great.
You have any good stories from any games you did in Philadelphia?
In Philadelphia, many. I can remember when I worked with Moose Johnston at the Link, many Eagles games when I was with Moose and Goose, the late Tony Scaramouche, who was also one of my favorites. One game, the fans right underneath the broadcast booth were giving it to Moose a little bit, not necessarily fans of the Cowboys in the stands at Eagles games, and they were kind of jokingly giving it to Moose during one of our commercial breaks, and he shut them up pretty quickly by flashing one of his 3 Super Bowl rings.
Scoreboard.
Down at that section of fans. A lot of memories. I mean, the Andy Reid, Donovan McNabb years, I don't think the Eagles get enough credit for how good those teams were, getting to 5 championship games. And we called a lot of those regular season games, and it was a lot of fun to watch that team grow and mature. As far as baseball, worked a lot of Phillies games during their glory years. We once had Ryan Howard in the booth with us for a couple of minutes during an Eagles game. And that night, he played in a playoff game right across the street. And Fox was doing both games. So as part of the promotion, we had Ryan in the booth with us for a few innings. One of our beloved crew members, Lou Tribbiani, who lived in the Philly area, passed away 10 years ago in 2012. And we had a couple of fundraisers at Chicky and Pete's.
Oh, yeah.
With Moose and Goose and our whole crew. And we raised a lot of money for a scholarship in Lou's name. And so many of the local teams were extremely gracious in donating tickets and jerseys. We had a Claude Giroux jersey. Jay Wright donated front row seats and a locker room visit at a Villanova game, among many other great items from the Eagles. And all of the teams. So unfortunately, Lou's passing led us to putting together those events, but they were memorable nights. As far as the Flyers, I've worked so many games through the years. I was calling the game on radio, and I've gone out to work with Brian Boucher for many years, and we always talk about the shootout, 2010. Game 82. I was doing the Rangers radio broadcast, and it was the only year they missed the playoffs in a stretch of 12 years. They made it 11 out of 12, and that was the only year they missed. So that was Bush always likes to joke that I told him that was game 82. So that was the last game of the regular season. Rangers were eliminated, and before I got in my car in the parking lot, my wife had already booked a trip to Florida. It was the kids' spring break. So because the Rangers missed the playoffs, we wound up going on vacation. So Bush likes to remind me that one of his biggest moments in the NHL was sending my family on vacation back in 2010.
Was that Olli Jokinen on that save that he made?
Was the last shooter. Yep.
Yeah, and then Bush blew a tire trying to have a celebration there. He's still pissed about that. Like he tried to get a good.
Oh, believe me, we remind him about that one too.
Yeah, no doubt. Is there anything that you've called Olympics, you've called just about everything under the sun, the four majors. You've called, so many different sports, so many different great players throughout the years, great partners. Is there anything that you haven't called that you want to call? Like, I think you'd be really good at Formula One, Kenny. So I put your resume in with Sky Sports.
I did once with Moose and Goose. We did the Richard Petty Experience down in Charlotte.
Oh, yeah.
Those guys actually drove the race car. I had never driven a stick shift before, so I sat in the passenger seat, and a professional driver, it took me around 3 or 4 laps at 130, 140 miles per hour. So that's the extent of my racing experience.
Is there anything that you want to call that you haven't called?
I've been real fortunate to be involved in all four to different extents over the last 25, 30 years, the four major sports in the U.S. I have called some other sports. I've done some boxing, worked some track and field and volleyball at the Olympics, believe it or not, for NBC. Curling looks like it might be fun. I've gone to curling matches at the Olympics. I really don't know much about it. It was somewhat confusing, but that's probably the only one I haven't called. To be honest, again, very fortunate that I've been involved, football and baseball with Fox, hockey with first the Capitals and then the Rangers, minor league days in Baltimore, Fox, NBC, Turner, basketball with the Knicks. I think the goal for all of us is to call the biggest events, and I've been lucky enough to call 7 or 8 Stanley Cup finals on radio, and then on the TV side 2 years ago when Tampa Bay beat Montreal, and then our crew with Eddie and Jonesy will have the Cup final this year for TNT. So really looking forward to that. With Fox, called 5 divisional playoff games, again with Moose and Goose, Darryl Johnston and Tony Siragusa. I worked the international world feed of Super Bowl 46, so I have had the opportunity to work.
Oh, that's cool.
One Super Bowl, the international feed. That would obviously be the goal for any sports play-by-play announcer, would be to call a Super Bowl on network TV in the United States. I've had the opportunity, like I said, on the world feed, so that would obviously be a goal and a lifetime thrill to continue to call the Stanley Cup final every other year. With Turner, we have it every odd year. ESPN has it on the even-numbered years. So, again, just very fortunate to be involved in so many big events. You mentioned Olympics. My first Olympics back in 2002, believe it or not, I got the call a week before. Doc Emmerich's dog fell ill, and Doc and his wife have a number of dogs, horses. They love animals, and Doc did not want to leave his wife home for 3 weeks with the sick dog, believe it or not. And that's how I wound up calling hockey at the 2002 Winter Olympics, and now it's 6th Winter Olympics later, 2 Summer Olympics. So those have been a lot of fun as well.
Were there any challenges for you pursuing the same line of work as such a famous father?
It's a good question. I get that once in a while. I didn't look at it as a challenge. Maybe other people would. I didn't feel pressure. Maybe others would. I was never forced to go into the family business. I just loved it. When I was 5 or 6, I received a tape recorder from my parents, and I started announcing games into the recorder. And when I was old enough, I would bring it to various games at Madison Square Garden or Shea Stadium. And Was very lucky in high school when a small cable station came to my school and I volunteered to announce the game and wound up working for them for 3 years, and then opportunities in college. And then the 2 years in Baltimore were huge. We were talking prior to getting started, and Keith Jones actually was on our team. My second year, 91, 92, he finished up at Western Michigan, turned pro. I witnessed his first professional goal with the Baltimore Skipjacks, but I wouldn't trade those years in for anything. Just the experience, getting reps, 80 games a year, working in the team office, riding the bus with the players. Barry Trotz was my road roommate for 2 years. Joel Quenneville was on our team the first year. He had gotten sent down by Washington at the end of his career. So I was riding the bus with, as it turned out, the second and third winningest head coaches in NHL history in Joel Quenneville and Barry Trotz.
Wow.
So unbelievable learning experience. And I mentioned earlier, I'm writing a book. It's called A Mic for All Seasons, and the I in Mike is a microphone. And I tell a lot of these stories about the early days in the minor leagues and travel tales and anecdotes about color analysts. So it brought back a lot of great memories.
When's the book coming out?
About a year from now.
About a year. Yep.
About a year.
Okay. It's a long process with the editors and the publishers, but
you get 200 plus partners.
A lot of partners. Jonesy was nice enough to write a blurb.
He didn't write it. You know that, right?
He may have dictated.
He probably spoke it and somebody dictated it for him.
Any secrets?
Have you read his book? It's like a third grade reading book.
I did read, written by John Buccigross and Jonesy. I did read his book in preparation for writing mine. So the problem was I had already heard most of the stories, so it was somewhat redundant, but it was he's got some great ones.
So his book was your inspiration.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A hockey book done right, Harry.
I had to go one page longer than Jonesy.
Yeah, there's a lot of pictures in his. You work all the different sports, so you deal with all the different athletes, and the cultures of the sports. They're all vastly different. The only reason I still do hockey, Kenny, 16 years later, and I'm still doing the games, is because the guys are so easy to deal with and they're so great. What's the differences in the guys you deal with? I'm not going to ask you to pick your favorite because I know it's hockey, but what's the differences in the guys and how you deal with, around the locker room and all that?
The hockey players historically have had that tremendous reputation, and a lot of it was their upbringing, whether in Canada or in small towns in Europe. But I'll have to admit, guys, we go in, it's been 29 years broadcasting NFL games, and we have these meetings with the players and coaches on Fridays and Saturdays, and I could probably count on one hand the ones that we did not enjoy spending time with. Now, some of it might be a result of, the quarterbacks and some of the other key players. They do it every week, so they're kind of used to it. But it's been overall a pretty positive experience. And I write about this in the book, but one of the best ever was Brett Favre. He would sit there for 45 minutes to an hour, never acted as if he had to be somewhere else or never looking at his watch. He would sit there and tell stories about hunting and fishing and his kids and growing up in Mississippi. And, a lot of it wasn't necessarily information you could use on the air, but he was tremendous. Guys like Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, they seem to have a photographic memory. Just listening to them talk about games they played in and plays they were involved in. Most of the quarterbacks are great because, again, they do it
polished
just about every week. They're polished. I remember the first ever game. It was the Rams and Cardinals back in 1994, and I was 26. My partner, Ron Pitts, was in his early 30s, and we walked into a meeting with 60-something-year-old Chuck Knox, and he was kind of looking at us like, who are these guys? So after about 10 minutes, I think he was done. But Buddy Ryan, we met with that weekend. And again, it was intimidating. I'm 26, who's Buddy Ryan? And we have to sit in a room and ask him questions. Now it's flipped. Now I'm older than a lot of these head coaches. So,
right.
I've kind of run through the gamut.
You brought up the Mannings. Have you seen their simulcast of the Monday night games? And what do you think of that kind of broadcast?
I love the Manning cast. I watched most of them last year. Watched the first one this year. Got home late last night after a hockey game, so I didn't see it during the Giants-Cowboys game. If you're a fan of one of the teams, you're probably going to watch the traditional telecast with Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. But if you're neutral, I would think the Manning cast, it's very entertaining, number one, but I learned so much about football. You hear their thought process and what goes into each and every play. So not that I want to see play-by-play announcers lose jobs at all, because that's not the case. But as a secondary broadcast, I'm a big fan of the Manning cast.
So you think there's room for that? I
do. There are so many. There are so many options for folks these days. Whether you're a youngster or 75 years of age, you have traditional television, but you have all the apps and the computer and the iPad or your phone, and you can watch 500 different things within seconds. So it's another option for people out there, and I don't think it's going away. We've seen it in some other sports. During the college football national championship game, they've had additional telecasts. We've seen it during some of the other pro sports as well. The Michael K. A-Rod telecast on ESPN, Sunday Night Baseball. So I think there's definitely a place for it, along with the traditional telecast.
Yeah, you still need the traditional,
right?
calling
The
game.
Manning sometimes might talk through a play or two. They're not necessarily focused on each and every play.
Yeah, it's a commentary. It's an interesting. I enjoy it as well. It's when I'm not heavily invested. I think it's fun to watch, and those two are great.
You're probably watching the other guys.
Yeah. Those two, like even Eli Manning has a personality. I don't know if you saw the Penn State thing.
It's
he did,
developing. Before our eyes.
When we would meet with him as a player, and I probably did 40 of his games through the years. He was always cordial and very nice when we would meet with him, but you never really saw the personality like we would with Peyton. But we always heard from ex-teammates and others around the team that he had a great personality in the locker room and that he was one of the big pranksters and jokesters. And now that the career is over, that's come out. He definitely, I'm sure, felt like he had a persona that he had to keep with as a player, as the quarterback of the New York Giants. And now that he's retired, we get to see all the other good stuff.
Yeah. Chad Powers, I think that the guy's name was.
Yeah, it was funny as hell. Yeah. You're going to be with two of my favorites this week, though. I used to do the Temple games during the Matt Rule era, and Phil Snow and Matt Rule are two of my favorite guys in sports.
They're great to talk to.
Yeah.
Phil Snow, I know Jonathan Vilma loves the meetings we've had with Phil Snow. I always like to bring up to Matt Rule something about New York, because he grew up before moving to State College. He grew up on Roosevelt Island in New York, and he would tell stories about taking 3 subways and a bus to get to a football field for practice as a youngster. So I always like to, throw a little New York, get a little New York anecdote from Coach Rule. Look forward to seeing him this week. Our good mutual friend Colin Thompson. Also Colin over the weekend, and obviously played for Coach Rule previously, and now back with the Panthers as well.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Last thing for you, Kenny, of the 4 majors, NFL, NBA, NHL, and MLB, who's the kind of the guy for you, the best that you've ever watched? Like in the NFL, is it a guy like, Al Michaels? Who's the creme de la creme play-by-play announcer for each of the majors, in your opinion?
Oh, wow. I thought you were talking about players, and
That's what I thought.
I was about to name Gretzky and some of the others.
Yeah, that would have been easy.
From a play-by-play standpoint, I think in the NFL, you have to go with Al Michaels. He's still at the highest level, even at his age. And I've gotten to spend a little time around him. Eddie Olczyk and I had a great dinner with Al and another mutual friend of ours last year in LA. And that was really the first time I spent extended time.
Yeah, he's a big Kings fan.
And he's a big Kings fan, big hockey fan, and the stories were flowing for about 3 hours. So I think in hockey, there are so many, but Doc Emmerich, just retired a couple of years ago, and I had the great opportunity to be a colleague of his at NBC. I don't want to leave anybody else out, but if I'm going with one, am I allowed to mention family members here or not?
Absolutely.
Because I think in basketball, my father is certainly considered by many to be, the voice of the NBA.
That's not a hot take.
for a
No,
number
it's
of
not.
decades, especially during the Chicago Bulls run in the 90s, the Knicks back in the 70s. But Mike Breen, who's another good friend and colleague, he's done more NBA finals than anybody now. And he's the lead TV voice for the Knicks. I work about 20 games when he's away on national assignment. And in baseball, it's got to be Vince Scully. Just passed away recently. There are so many others. I mean, I enjoy watching whether it's Mike Tirico or Ian Eagle, Joe Buck. Too many to name, really, but the ones that you mentioned are certainly among the best of all time in their respective sports.
My favorite hockey guy was Gary Thorne.
Oh yeah,
he was great. He was.
Damn, was
So
he good.
when I filled in for Doc in 2002, as I referenced earlier, Gary Thorne was the other hockey announcer there for NBC. So he did most of the men's, the U.S. games, and I would do some of the other games, and then I did the women's gold medal game. He worked the men's, but he was a top hockey voice on ESPN for a long time. In Philadelphia, we've had some great ones: Gene Hart, Jim Jackson on the TV side,
Harry Callis,
Merrill Reese. So I was a big radio listener as a kid. We didn't have cable TV until I was about 17 or 18. So we had 9 pro teams in New York.
Right.
I was listening to all the games on the radio.
Man.
When did you get cable? Like the early 80s, like I did?
Yeah. I was like 17 when I was about to move out to go to college, and we finally got cable.
Yeah, it was a whole different world. Hey, Kenny, best of luck this weekend down in Carolina, and great seasons coming up for you. You're going to be busy, man. So I hope you punch in that quality time clock with the family over the summer.
Thanks for squeezing us in.
Well, a lot of quality time over the summer and a lot of quality time with Jonesy coming up. So, no, I appreciate it. Jason, Harry, always great to be with you guys, and hopefully we could do it again at some point during the season.
Awesome.
Sounds
great
good.
stuff. Thanks, Kenny.
Thanks, guys.
I'd list off all the places he's worked, Har.
Oh, my God.
But we'd be here it's another episode. It'd be like, okay, so the NHL play-by-play voice on TNT, the Rangers. I mean, it's NFL it's insane.
And we finally found a guy that has more partners than me.
Yeah. But does he have more partners than Anthony?
Well, that's true. Yeah, that's a good question.
That's the co-host graveyard, which I have a headstone, Har.
Yes, you do. I got to tell you about Som Sleep, man, because if you're having trouble getting enough sleep at night, Som Sleep has you covered. The scientifically advanced Som Stack includes ingredients that are naturally found in your body, like GABA, magnesium, and melatonin. And sleep is the best form of recovery. And it has helped NFL founder and NFL tight end Colin Thompson take his game to the next level. It's quite simple. All you have to do is drink one serving just 30 minutes before bedtime, and your body's going to naturally calm itself down. Other sleep supplements, they're going to leave you groggy in the morning, but not Som Sleep. You're going to wake up feeling refreshed and ready to conquer the day. So make sure to check them out at getsom.com. That's GETSOM.com, and use the code JEEZ, JEEZ, for 10% off your order. Get Som Sleep.